Good morning. My name is Sarah Simon, and my husband and I have been members at FELC for almost 3 years. When Pastor Ryan asked me to talk about a time faith came alive, I was excited. But then I remembered I don't really like public speaking, and I really don't like watching myself on video. But I knew instantly the story I would tell. My dad passed away almost 2.5 years ago. People who know me say I'm a lot like him, which I take as a compliment. But one trait I get from my mom is a need to control things. During the last week of his life, I had to learn to place that control in God's hands. Late one Sunday evening, my mom called and said that something was seriously wrong with Dad. As I sped to their home, I sent up a silent prayer. "Please, God, I'm not ready yet." Jesus whispered, "I have this." And that is what having faith is all about. Letting go of what we cannot control and placing trust in God to do the rest. You see, Jesus was there with us. Jesus was the angels on earth, the ones Pastor Mary talked about last Christmas Eve. On Sunday night, Jesus was the steadiness of the ambulance driver who grabbed my arm and said, "You should gather your family." Jesus was a comfort for my best friend when I told her this was the worst outcome, and she assured me it was not. He was a strength in my brother Paul when he spent the first night with my dad in the hospital. He was the acceptance in the room when my dad realized he would not be walking again. He was a wisdom in my dad on Tuesday when he asked for each of us individually. One by one, my dad spoke words every child would love to hear before they lose a parent. The sentiments my dad shared were beautiful from his heart and something we will all cherish as a true gift from God. God was a resolution when my dad told us he wanted to go home, and he was faith embodied when my dad shared he was not afraid. How comforting was that to all of us? God was a trust we had in the beautiful hospice nurse who assured us my dad would be okay. Jesus was a joy we felt on our Jimmy party, complete with some of his favorites, Manhattans, Busch Lights, and ice cream, which provided all of us a good laugh. Friday night was the best gift a grandpa could give his grandkids before he went to heaven. God allowed him to be awake long enough for all of his grandkids to each share their favorite memory, and with my dad and all of us. We laughed and cried, and my dad was happy. My dad said very little that night, but he did whisper, it was all about the little things. And before he fell asleep, he said, it was a great night. In the minutes and hours waiting and praying was reassurance in the small signs we desperately needed. When my dad asked who was in the backyard and we could not see anyone, I told him they must be angels. He asked me to get his walker, and I told him he wasn't going to need his walker where he was going. God was the comic relief when my sweet dad said to me, "That's easy for you to say." Jesus was the laughter when our hearts were breaking into pieces. God was a mercy when my dad fell into a peaceful sleep in his final days. My niece Sophia slipped a rosary on my dad's hand and prayed a decade of the rosary for him. It never left his fingers. God was the sacrifice when my husband wanted to take my shift as night nurse because he didn't want me to be afraid and alone. And God was the peace and calm when my dad took his last breath, all of us gathered by his side. We asked for reassurance that all was well, and God sent 3 deer in the yard. The day before, there were only 2. Angels are all around us. God is always near, but we are also called to be his angels as well.